Hello and welcome to Health Analytics Asia Roundtable. I'm Tariq Hashmat and today we are talking about one of the many scars of COVID-19, the mental health of children. It has been over a year since COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, over a year since we were suddenly made to shut ourselves inside our homes, forbidden to shake hands, forbidden to meet our friends, and our workplaces were shut. Over a year since children were suddenly deprived of their school, of meeting their friends, and of playing in the playgrounds. Children are 28% of the world's population, and COVID-19 and lockdowns has impacted their lives as it has everyone else's in more ways than one. Now, their mental health and the impact of the happenings of the last 1 year is something that we all need to talk about. Joining us today are Dr. Debanjan Banerjee, psychiatrist at NIMHANS in Bangalore, Dr. Prama Bhattacharya, clinical psychologist from Kolkata, Vrinda Srivastava, a high school standard 12 student from Gurgaon, Rashi Dhilla, a master's in psychology student and a volunteer for a mental health helpline during the lockdown, and Mr. Ramkumaar Shanker, a parent of two young children, one of who is a 2-year-old who I'm sure cannot make sense of being put at home right now. All right, mental health of children during the pandemic. Let's talk. And I'm going to start off with Dr. Debanjan Banerjee here. You've worked on the subject of mental wellness and you've co-authored several papers on this topic, actually. So do you think there is enough conversation going on in India about mental health, especially amongst children?
See, if you mean, Tariq, that uh, you know, it's a conversation among the general public, or let's say in the media, then I tell no. In the scientific discourse, there have been, some research going on, especially in the condition of the children, the mental health condition of the children during the pandemic.
Mhm.
And as I welcome all the other panelists here, wishing them good health, I'm sure that they have also come across similar experiences that I'm going to share probably today. So when we talk about mental health of children, uh, you know, uh, I also deal with another population, which is the other age extreme. That's people who are elderly, so above 60 years age. And very ironically, both these age spectrums converge. So there are a lot of similarities when you look at these two groups, the elderly and the children. So you can't just talk about mental disorders when you talk about mental health. You have to understand the social context, their well-being, their environments, their expectations, the human rights perspective, especially in an adolescent, and especially in the children, it becomes very important because each age range will be having its own unique needs. As you rightly said, that a 2 to 3 year old might only be able to understand the immediate change in the environment and the adaptability, whereas an adolescent will have, a very different aspect of relationships, gatherings, friends, physical proximity, and things like that.
Right.
So in shortly, I would say that yes, I think we need to increase the dialogue among the public, because most of our research oriented dialogues stay extremely confined to a very limited space.
Dr. Prama Bhattacharya, your thoughts. How were the children, especially in India, affected during the lockdown? As your experiences being a clinical psychologist, what do you think about this? How were the children affected during the lockdown?
Right. As you can see, like you don't need to be a clinical psychologist or a mental health professional per se to understand what we all have been undergoing during this pandemic. At least we are in a situation, the adults, we were in a situation where we could use social media as a platform to express our views. We could control and regulate our lives the way we wanted it. But
Mhm.
for the children, I think it has been a massive change from going to school in a regular fashion, going to the playground, or going for their different types of lessons like swimming
Mhm.
lessons, skating lessons, dancing lessons, to being absolutely secluded within the household with only the parents, because most of the Indian families are nuclear families right now.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
don't have
Mhm.
cousins, you don't have siblings, you don't have people of the same age to play with unlike we did when we were younger.
Hmm.
And that has created a huge impact on the children's life on a day-to-day basis. It has created problem with their companionship, their socialization. It has kind of jolted the whole process of their having a regular growth. It is a kind of a blow on their regular development that
Mhm.
they otherwise would have experienced. A fight with a friend in the school, a fight with the mother over the tiffin, what they're going to take into school,
Mhm.
and achievement in the school competition. Everything has been taken out of their life.
Mhm.
Where we are talking that how the children should not be exposed much to the computers and to videos and kind of stuffs like that. It
Yeah.
is the only platform that is left now with which children can actually connect to the external world. They're having their classroom experiences from their home. They are left with nothing but seeing movies on YouTube or other channels and
Yeah.
watching TVs, video games, and parents are also using these as kind of reinforcing their everyday activities
Mhm.
because otherwise there is nothing left for the children to do. So yes, it has had a huge impact on their uh, typical life, if not normal
Right.
life.
Uh, Dr. Banerjee, can we put a number to this? Can we estimate the number of children who might have been clinically affected in this crisis alone in India?
Um, I think I'm afraid I'm still I can't put in a number because see there hasn't been any nationwide uh, statistical estimate of the number of children who have been affected. But yes, I can put a little bit more, for the public understanding into perspective. See, the National Mental Health Survey in 2015 to 16 that was conducted by NIMHANS Bangalore projected that around 7 in every 100 children below 10 years and 12 in every 100 children. So, by the World Health definition, you have to consider every person below 18 years as a child, keeping that in mind. So, for above 10 years, 12 in 100 children and adolescents do suffer from some sort of mental problem, a quote unquote psychiatric disorder. And for every single person who suffers for a disorder, there are 3 to 4 times increased risk of children and adolescents who have mental health challenges.
Mhm.
Now, as Dr. Bhattacharya was mentioning, by challenges, we mean challenges with education, with growth, with children's rights,
Yeah.
problems with abuse, problems with substance use, problem with child trafficking, because you can't really hold mental health in vacuum.
Yeah.
Now, keeping this NMHS data in perspective, our child and adolescent psychiatry department in NIMHANS, after the unlock period when people have started coming back, the OPD caseloads have risen by at least
Okay.
double the times due to pre-COVID.
Mhm.
And children with depression, with stress, with anxiety disorders, with post-traumatic stress
Yeah.
has increased, especially in the age group of 8 to 12.
Yeah.
There have been a marked change in behavior with people, with children who are already having challenging behaviors. Let's say children who have attention deficit, hyperkinetic disorder, ADHD, who have autism spectrum disorders, who have intellectual problems.
Yeah.
So because there is lack of social stimulation, lack of mixing with people of similar age, constant home confinement, sometimes inability to comprehend what's going on, and often difficulty in communication with
Mhm.
parents. So their emotional behavioral challenges have been extremely difficult, and a lot of them have actually suddenly worsened who
Yeah.
were previously stable. Let's say almost one-fourth of the entire clinical population who were coming to NIMHANS, and NIMHANS harbors a significant, being a tertiary mental health care center. But it's very important to remember that in a country like India, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So what we do sitting in our chambers is nothing compared to what is there in the community. And we have a caregiver with us today, we have a parent today. I think they are the people who bear the maximum brunt of what goes on before actually people come to us. Because as where mental health stays in India right now, unless there is tipping or crossing that gray line of threshold, people really don't want to come to a psychiatrist. And in case of children, that's all the more stigmatizing, because we in generally are perceived, mental health professionals are perceived to be a strict no for children unless otherwise.
So, those are really interesting points. I wanted to shift the discussion to personal experiences, because like you said, we have a parent and we have a student as well here. Vrinda, this was the final year of your high school. You're a standard 12 student. How did the lockdown affect you and your classmates, your peers? Did any of your friends, you yourself or any of your friends face any issues?
So starting with the lockdown, everybody was really sad that this was our last year and it went down like this. But then a lot of my friends, we planned of going out when the unlock started, but then there was a new strain, so we stopped going out for a while. So personally, I felt that my routine was very disturbed because of online classes. So first of all, I mean, online classes were the only option at the time, and even now. But that routine of going to school, physically meeting people, that was something that was affected on a very huge scale. So other than that, socialization, obviously, as a lot of people have mentioned, we we only had social media to guide us and talk to our friends and all. So that was one impact. Other than that, I think physical activity. I mean, I myself have stopped exercising for a while. I was very active when school was there. Physical activities were happening in school. We were having physical education and all. But then, um, when the lockdown struck, everybody just went lethargic, and yeah, that's how I felt.
Now, Rashi, I want to just come to you here. You volunteered for a mental health helpline during the lockdown, I believe.
That's right.
How do you think children of various age groups reacted to these unprecedented restrictions? Do you have any examples of it from your experiences with that helpline?
Yeah, sure. So with younger kids, this is not relating specifically to the helpline, but I previously worked as a special educator. So I know previous clients who are on the autism spectrum who have stopped receiving therapy because teletherapy is hard. So a lot of kids on the spectrum who really kind of backtracked in their progress and have just kind of, haven't been able to make as much progress as they would have otherwise.
Yeah.
With a lot of younger populations, that's something that I've seen. With more adolescent populations, as someone else also mentioned, there's a whole thing of abuse in the households where there were a lot of calls coming in where there were like 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds saying, I was living in a hostel, or I was a college student living away in a PG, or stuff like that, and then they had to come back home to an abusive household where they were obviously not comfortable. There were also actually quite a few calls of adolescents discussing suicide and suicidal thoughts, which was definitely something that was triggered by the lockdown and by moving back home. And even if they didn't move back home, generally the whole I think the stress and the nervousness of everything kind of got to their parents, kind of trickled down to the kids themselves. Sometimes their own school stress. I mean, there have been cases where a lot of 10th graders, 12th graders who have their boards this year were kind of very nervous about the situation that they would be in if like college would start on time and things like that. So there were a lot of it with the helpline itself. There were more calls from adolescents, and that was more to do with abuse and suicide. Whereas with younger kids, I think personally I've seen a lot of cases of kids with more developmental disorders who kind of had a had a break in a lot of their therapy, which has caused a problem.
So, did you see? Did you? Sorry.
Yeah, no. Sure, Tariq, please go on. I'll come after that.
Okay, I wanted to ask if you throughout the different stages of lockdown, did you observe any trends, as in at any point were their parents contacting you seeking help for their child?
Correct. Yeah. So in the beginning, like right at the start, there was a lot of mass panic. Everyone was just really afraid of what this is going to end up to be, because there was a lot of uncertainty regarding everything. So parents itself were calling just with the general stress of how are we going to deal with this? How is school going to go ahead? And of course, these answers were unavailable to us as well. But in the beginning, there was just a lot of panic and a lot of stress for everyone involved, students, parents, everyone. Towards the end of the lockdown, when things became more clear as to how things would go forward, probably it would stay online for this year, and then moving forward, it would be evaluated. At that point, it was more to do with, okay, what are our options now? Because things also got more expensive, like school fees got more expensive, and a lot of resources got more expensive. So a lot of parents were then wondering, do I have the means to continue with this kind of education, or do I have the means to continue with this kind of therapy? So, or even therapy in general, like a lot of people who were going for regular therapy decided that, okay, is this an investment that I can continue making? So they would have to kind of step back and be like, okay, do I need to resume this at some other point? So that was more towards the end of lockdown, where the panic had dissipated and there was more certainty. But of course, there was a lot of like buzz about how this was going to go ahead.
Banerjee, you wanted to respond to any of your remarks?
Yeah, Tariq, thanks. So I think Rashi made a wonderful point here about the risks of abuse, which has significantly increased because the helpline that we were running as a part of NIMHANS, and we had started it at the time when lockdown started because people were not able to come to OPDs, they were shut down, and we continued it for almost 8 months. It's even there now, in fact, which was also supported by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, one thing that consistently came almost every single day, we are still not at a liberty to release the exact data because we haven't got the permission from the government so far. But, I can share this on personal ground. I have consent for that. That every single day we were almost getting repeated calls of people, of adolescents especially, who were quite much agitated, who were having regular discord and discomfort with the parents or with the authority figures because they were not able to they were not able to go out of the family circles, and especially in children who were slightly younger and in joint families. So we call it the chronic entrapment, because many families were not in a habit to stay together in confined spaces for such a long time. So it did increase the risks of various kind of abuse, alleged incest, and even both child abuse and elder abuse were on the rise, which were reported by different kind of domestic helplines, including the child protection helplines. That's one. The second point I wanted to mention, I think Vrinda brought it very correctly, that physical activity has markedly reduced to an alarming rate. So recently, I think just a few months back, the Cardiological Society of India had released some data mentioning that childhood diabetes, especially people who are diabetic, and especially people who are on the pre-diabetic level, they are tending to slide more into irregular control of their blood sugars, and even a period of 1 year is enough to cause changes in children who might go on to develop childhood obesity. It might sound a little weird, but even a period of 1 year is enough, especially people who are on the borderline. And the last thing is, India is a country where PEM, protein energy malnutrition, is rampant. So for people who already, we are talking about probably socialization, urbanization, these are things for more privileged classes here. Let's think about people who stay in rural areas. Let's think about people who, are below the poverty line, people who are homeless, people who do not receive the required nutrition, a large majority. For them, this 1 year has taken off significant amount of normal physical and mental emotional growth.
Yeah.
And that I'm not sure if we'll be able to bring it back, because this is a lost year.
Right.
And if you actually talk about the bigger picture, probably research-oriented data will emerge later on. But this growth, it might not be just simply related to psychiatric disorders, or they might not suffer from quote unquote depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, or all these terms. But then it will affect their emotional development, their ability to read, understand, comprehend as they grow up.
Yeah.
And this is that one missing year which will affect them for years to come.
Now I want to turn to Mr. Ramkumar. Now your daughter, she's 7, I believe. She's in her primary school years. How did she make sense of the lockdown, the suddenness of the changes?
Yeah, there are probably three facets that I would kind of like to touch upon, right? Two as a parent, and the third one probably as a teacher, because my mother's been handling tuitions for quite some time, and I'm happy to see one of our panelists who's actually a former student as well. So it's nice to see the person out here. So my daughter, she's 7, and you're pretty much right. It kind of coincides with whatever we've been talking about, but she moved out of Montessori, and it was her first year in primary school, right? Now, the Montessori way of learning has been entirely different. It's something which is collaborative. It's across different age groups. That's how children have been taught to kind of pick their learning skills. And the first year, the first standard of your primary school, we did not expect that it would fall in this way, right? Zero exposure to other students. Everything was online. The kind of attention deficit that my daughter underwent, I think it was a little tough to manage in the first few months. The role of parents and their responsibilities kind of definitely increased a lot, because we were expected to sit through classes with children just to ensure that they catch wind of whatever is being taught. You wouldn't have children, just casually saying hi to another classmate either. Teachers or parents would have to prompt them and say, "Hey, that's your friend. Why didn't you just say hi?"
Right.
They wouldn't know how to keep a conversation going. Right. So that was the second problem that we faced. When it came down to online content, YouTube and every other channel, it took a lot of moderation from our side to kind of filter out content that's kind of needed, get them onto stuff like reading books and other useful hobbies that could kind of, somewhere motivate them to watch the right kind of content, right? It took us a while, but we got there eventually. Now we don't need to, at least with my daughter, I don't need to just casually check in whether she's watching something she isn't supposed to be watching, because she now is kind of used to it, right? But it's very tough to get her out of the habit of watching TV, right? So food goes in with TV, everything else goes in with TV, because you just don't have an outlet at some point in time. So this was another aspect. Thirdly, she's a ping pong player, so she had been training for ping pong right from her formative ages. The first few months we couldn't send her for ping pong training, and then we enrolled her into a chess class, and then we later found out that she preferred obviously ping pong much more than chess for very obvious reasons, because anything that's even remotely linked to online, I think children just lose interest. We've gotten down to that, right? We've just gotten to a stage where they would do anything to just get out of whatever they've been doing at any point in time. So her interest in ping pong, it kind of tripled during this entire period, right? But for me, the most important part of it has been the physical changes or the body changes that we're seeing with a 1-year-old kid, right? And she's been a person who's I wouldn't say has been on the obese side, or has been a gorger on food or any of those things, right? She's been a relatively skimpy child from childhood that we've known. But I think for some strange reason, their connection with food during this 1 year and the lack of exercise it's just gone haywire. They just don't understand what's happening with their body, because it's all mindless eating that we would typically put it across, right? So that's the way things have been. So this is with my daughter. I'll briefly touch upon my son, who's a toddler, who's 2-year-old, right? He was he was born in 2019. He was a premature kid. So the first year we spent a lot of time confining him to indoors, right? And then 2020 came in. Uh, for him, he's used to seeing his parents at home. So the moment I got to change my clothes into say something which is a little more formal, he just doesn't know how to react because he's never seen me that way,
Right.
right?
Right.
But there's been a huge delay in speech, huge delay.
Okay.
They are unable to express themselves at all, right? And this is a very small incident that I wanted to quote. Not about 6 months back, 4 or 5, no, I wouldn't say 6, 5 months back, after being confined at home, the home surroundings, etc. One day we just said, let's head out nearby for a walk. Got him onto the baby carrier. We went out for a walk. We were assuming he would be thrilled and, it would be a big change for him. But then he just looked around. He was perplexed. He was confused. He just didn't know. He felt so much out of place, visibly uncomfortable. And then we didn't know what to do. And anybody would look at him and say hi. He wouldn't respond back. We came back home. The moment we came back home and got into the lift, he started smiling.
Okay.
So that's when we realized it was a world of change even for a toddler who's probably in their formative years. And then it took us a lot of effort, daily efforts to kind of go out for walks and kind of get him used to that. Now it's come down to a situation. So Tariq, you would know it. My family and me, we've all tested positive for COVID. We are in the recovering phase. This weekend is when we come out of it. But these 10 days, the tantrums of my toddler has kind of tripled because for him, all these days, a casual outing would just mean even walking down to the ground floor or to the nearby park and so on. Right. He's been confined to home for the past 2 weeks, because of which I think the tantrums is kind of increased, because we can understand and we can feel his inability to express it because there is a delay in speech. Having said that, the advent of TV channels and everything else is, in the case of toddlers, it's not helping. It's kind of adding more fuel to the fire, right? And the last bit, as I said, as a teacher, this is where there's a lot of responsibility on parents as well, right? We've had cases where parents did not send their kids out for tuitions and tutorials for, say, as long as 3 months, 4 months in this, they kind of just thought they could manage it at home. But it came down to a situation in 3 or 4 months' time when they were not just helpless, but I think, parents also have a moral responsibility to how they're able to moderate their children's education. In all of those cases, we had some negative cases where parents would just point out to children saying, it's just online class, you can afford to take it a little easy, you can cheat, you can look at your books, just get done with the classes, come what may, and so on and so forth, right? But as a parent, I would say my biggest challenge has been the fact that while we've learned how to cope with these situations, and we've had a lot of inputs coming in from teachers on how to conduct online classes and to, for children to be a part of it, what do we do once we get out of this phase? How do you get children to adapt either to the new normal, or how do you help them break this entire monotype? I think that is a big grappling question.
Yeah, I just want to repeat what you just mentioned earlier, to let this panel and our viewers know that Mr. Ramkumaar has been tested COVID positive, as is his entire family. We wish you all a speedy recovery. Dr. Banerjee, I'm sure he raised several important points, and I want to know what your thoughts on the telltale signs that children exhibit, and how do you know when they need help? And I want to circle back to Dr. Bhattacharya also and get her opinion on this as well. So when do you know that your child needs help? What are the telltale signs?
Yeah, just before going to that, Mr. Ram, how are you doing right now?
Fine, sir. I think all the scary symptoms are at least down. But my favorite tagline has always been the fact that I wouldn't want my worst enemy ever to undergo this disease. I think that's how bad it could be.
So right now, I believe that you and your family members are recovering well.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I wish you a speedy recovery.
Thank you
That's
so
great to
much.
know. So, coming back to what Tariq asked, uh, again, it's extremely, it can be varied. It depends on which age, when you're talking about children, which age you're talking about. Uh, if it's children below 5 years
Yeah.
who are, let's say, in the developmental and the pre-developmental, the formative ages,
Mm.
uh, it can be very different. It can be change in feeding habits, change in sleep schedules, waking time, crankiness. Bedwetting is a very, very common symptom. And, a very weird kind of stranger anxiety, not adapting to new environments, not engaging normally with parents.
Mm-hmm.
Play is a very, very important area, which I'm sure Dr. Bhattacharya will further speak about. The way they play, and especially, when children, for children, that the way they express is very different.
Right.
So how they write, how they paint, the themes and the content of that makes a huge difference. Just to give you a very small example, so one of the an 8-year-old kid who was brought to us in the month of September with again a speech and a walking delay which has been there for a long time, and now she developed a lot of problems with a lot of stuttering and reluctance to even participate in online classes. We started out of the various things. We started with kind of engaging her in art and trying to use art as a mode of expression. And the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that she actually drew was random, just random bits of ink, black ink on a white paper. That's all that she did, and she took a lot of time to do that. And it was absolutely, it didn't make any sense. If you look at the paper,
Mm.
if possible, I'll actually send a copy to you later on.
Yeah.
We were amazed. There was no sense that you could make out of it. It was
Mm.
just random black specks on a paper.
Right.
So, she kept doing that in just different ways. So when we asked her later as to what she really meant when she further recovered, and, it took some time, and just cutting it short, what she actually meant was that is what I felt last 1 year has been to me. I had apparently a lot of things to do, but actually I had no one. We were three people in a room. My father was busy with his work. He was
Yeah.
working from home. My mom was trying to balance work from home versus work for home, and I was there. uh, Everybody was once in a while coming and asking me how I was doing.
Mm.
But then I really didn't have my friends. I didn't have my teachers. I didn't have things to do apart from browsing probably the same kind of content on the net over and over again.
Right.
So it was monotonous for me. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
That was one. Coming back to people who are slightly elder. So in adolescence, I think it will be clear as adults as well. They will face lack of sleep. There can be weight loss. There can be extreme crankiness, agitation, worsening mood towards evening. Now, mind it, all these things that I'm telling you kind of differentiate stress, which is normal, from distress, which is an abnormal stress. And especially people of 15 to 18 years old, when they start feeling extreme kind of sadness, bitterness, not feeling like going to work, complete social exclusion, not even virtually communicating with each other, and having thoughts of self harm, those are the red flag signs that we call. And they are the preventive signs that need to be detected if we actually have to prevent self harm or suicide. In fact, we are trying to discuss with the government for a national suicide prevention strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And we are drafting a policy paper in the Lancet Psychiatry, which is
Mm-hmm.
due to release in a couple of months. We are specifically mentioning the issues related to adolescents during COVID-19, so that some specific steps can be taken by the policymakers when they formulate or amend the disaster management policies.
Right.
The last thing, for children who are between 8 to 12 years, a very important thing is feeding habits. And second, uh, the kind of content or the kind of time they spend on net. Mind it, even though things like YouTube or other digital platforms are, they have helped us a lot, the time spent online have
Yeah.
also significantly influenced their sleep, uh, their education, and their involvement in studies.
Right.
So I think these are just some measures which help us to decide on the further action.
Dr. Bhattacharya, your thoughts before I proceed to yeah, just your thoughts.
Tariq, this can be a never-ending discussion on
Yeah.
what can be the red flags and what can be the possible measures, considering the layers of socio-economic strata of children we have in India. The kind of problems each strata is experiencing is much different from the other.
Right.
The urban children are facing one kind of problems, as Dr. Banerjee mentioned, than the rural children. Yes, all of us are sitting in different cities, and so we are more concerned about the urban children, the exposure to internet, the overexposure to internet, the lack of space, the lack of sleep, the mental health problems. Dr. Banerjee has talked about most of the symptoms that can be identified as red flags by the parents. But yes, something that is going to make the parents a bit more aware is that of the we have been discussing this over and over, the amount of physical exercises that has reduced. So it is not only going to affect their health, obesity, cardiac problems, diabetes, it is having a havoc on their attention span.
Right.
So children are specifically individuals who are bubbling with energies all the time, and they need the right way to channelize those physical energies through their play, through jumping, through all kind of actions they take throughout the whole day. And that kind of controls the tantrums, the whole crankiness. It improves their attention span when they're doing certain cognitive activities. But while they are confined at home, this whole physical activity thing is getting lost into a haywire, and there is no activity. So the attention span is affected. As Mr. Ram talked about, the tantrums his toddler and the doctor is throwing.
Right.
So the children should actually be encouraged into more physical activities that can also be done within the house itself. Maybe they can be taken to the roof, the garden, if the house or the apartment has any. They can be encouraged for skipping or kind of activities that you can actually do indoor, because the physical energy that they're holding within themselves needs to be channelized. Otherwise, it's going to affect them into a lot of other ways. About the adolescent children, especially the 15 to 18 years, space has been a huge problem. The parents should be really, really concerned about where to draw the lines, where to give them the space, and where to actually monitor them closely so that they do not lose their way out into the wild. I think we are losing out on time, so I'll get into that stage.
No, I just want to slightly pivot the discussion towards identification and acceptance. But before that, very briefly, the whole issue has two aspects to this. It is the restrictions induced mental health issues, and then it's a whole different story if the children themselves are infected, as is the case with the children of Mr. Ramkumaar and himself and his wife as well. So I want to know from very briefly from Mr. Ramkumaar, from Rashi and Vrinda, your experiences of having an infected person called, as in case of Russia, as in fact a COVID positive child calling you up, or for Vrinda, any of your colleagues or your classmates or peers being infected, and how does that affect you and them, of course? So yeah, Rashi, could you just you can start off with you. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so there's actually a lot of panic, especially with kids, because sometimes we've gotten a lot of calls from more rural areas where parents may or may not know precautionary measures, may not know what kind of, what are the next steps to take, the procedures to take. But then the kids, are kind of more, they use their phones, they use the internet, they kind of know about COVID and things that they could do, but then there's a lot of uncertainty. So because of that uncertainty, there's a lot of panic created. So more often than not, when people call us, it's they don't know that they're positive. They're usually just scared that they are. So they might have come in contact with someone, or they might have some symptoms. So they'll call up in that case and they'll ask, these are my symptoms. Do you think it's possible? So then that panic just has to be kind of streamlined into more like productive ways, right? You have to tell them where they can go. And that would depend again from area to area. Now, if they're in a rural area, you'll have to like tell them what kind of places would have a testing center, what kind of hospitals would have a testing center, what would the test involve even? Because a lot of times they expect a blood test, but that's obviously not the case. The swab test would be enough. So like even basic things like this they would just need to be informed of what they're to expect. And then the panic would subside by quite a bit. Just knowing, just the certainty that, okay, even if I self-isolate, even if I just quarantine by myself, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And to tell them what the warning signs are, if your fever is not going down in 3 or 4 days, if your cough is not going down in a few days, definitely go see the doctor again. See if you want to get hospitalized, if you're having trouble breathing, if you can get your hands on oximeter, that's good too. So things like that, basically, just very, even just the most basic things that would just create a sense of certainty for them to understand that, okay, what's happening to me is not different or abnormal. It's normal. A lot of other people are going through it, and there's a lot of help available for this.
Right. Vrinda, I want to know from you, any of your friends, any of your colleagues, what are your experiences? Has anyone in your circle been COVID positive, and how has it impacted them?
So recently, my friend and my mother also had COVID-19. So now they're well recovered, but I remember being very paranoid when I had a little cough. So my friend told me that I have these symptoms when I had that cough or a cold, I was overly precautious and I was constantly washing my hands and using sanitizers and going about like that. But then on the other hand, I have this group of people who are like, COVID is nothing, it's over and all that. And they don't practice proper social like norms and social distancing, etc., because they think that it won't happen to them. I mean, they're positive but overly positive, like it won't happen to us, it's nothing, it'll go away in no time. So I think that I mean, being in a house with my mom having COVID recently, I was very precautious. But then I think people who think it won't happen to them need to be really need to take care of what they're doing and practice proper social distancing. Even when I was going to school for a while, I saw people hugging each other and shaking hands, which is not supposed to happen, but then it happened anyway. But there was no proper surveillance or anything at that time. So I think following proper protocol would be a very good step, because COVID, it's not ending, and we're not certain of what is going to happen in the future as of now.
Okay, Mr. Ramkumar, how did your 2-year-old take? I mean, how did he deal with? Did you see any changes? I mean, prior to being infected, and I remember you mentioned before this call to my colleague Raj that to get him tested, you had to make sure he was asleep.
Actually, a small correction there, because we couldn't get him tested, but we were kind of sure that he was down with COVID. We managed to get a 7-year-old tested. With a 7-year-old, it was a lot more easier because for the past 1 year, I think there's been a lot of conversations we've been having in terms of what it means and so on and so forth. And, just out of the blue, right, we just have a very small ritual that before we go to bed, there's a small prayer that she kind of quotes, and we ensured that she used to pray for people, who are down with COVID, right? So the moment all of us were down with it, so she kind of understood that this is something which is a little serious, right? But she suddenly donned a little bit of seriousness She wanted to kind of, in the initial first day, she wanted to imitate a few of those symptoms. She used to complain of leg ache and all of those things. And then we managed to have a conversation with the pediatrician, and then we told her that, you know what, it isn't as serious as you think it is. I think you should be fine. That's it. It was just 1 or 2 days that she had that initial problems, after which I think she was kind of completely fine with it. What amazed me the most was she was completely cooperative when it came down to the swab test, because it's not easy for a child to definitely take up the swab test. But she was very cooperative. The toddler, as I said, has been, he did not have any body changes or fevers or temperature of any of those things, because probably their immunity system is far better than any of us. It's more to do with their moods, their mood swings, and their need to crave for attention, right? And with a 7-year-old, they have an opportunity to express because they can talk. With a toddler, since they are unable to express, the manifestation of what they want to explain, it's just all over the place. So as the first few days we found it a little tough to kind of interpret what is he trying to communicate. But I think over the period of these past 2 weeks, I think it's now we kind of know what to expect when he's visibly upset with something.
I just want to talk about a little more about identification and acceptance of mental health problems within the society as a whole. And I believe Dr. Bhattacharya did raise the issue of children with autism, ADHD, and other special needs. Dr. Bhattacharya, you first, and then probably Dr. Banerjee, your thoughts on what can parents do under these circumstances? And do you think a public health crisis such as COVID-19 has had a detrimental effect on the general progress of mental health awareness in the country?
On the contrary, it's been a while that we have been talking about mental health in such a length. The pandemic has kind of, it rather took a pandemic for us to identify the mental health gaps in the country in various sections, including marginalized populations, the special children, the children with special needs, and mental health populations, mental illnesses. It really took a pandemic for us to be so open about mental illness. It took a celebrity suicide to talk about suicide at such a length during the pandemic. So yes, we are more open to discussing mental health related issues in the social media, in the academic sectors, or in the even in the newspapers. People are writing, mental health professionals are writing constantly. Dr. Banerjee is a regular columnist in various newspapers. But I doubt how much it would be affecting, having a long-term effect as terms of awareness in the mitigating the crisis of the mental health problems in the long run. Because whatever we are facing right now, we are kind of accusing it that it is all pandemic related. Once the pandemic related stresses are gone, this would probably just vanish in the thin air. But no, it won't. Why it took us for the pandemic to put a focus on the mental health problems, but the mental health problems were always there. Maybe the issues have kind of exacerbated because of the pandemic. Some who had the vulnerabilities have fallen prey to the pandemic because of the mental health related issues, but the mental illnesses were always there. The statistics, the epidemiological findings speak loudly about it. But no, we were not talking about it before this. Probably we would not talk about it once the pandemic is over. So public awareness probably would again go away once the pandemic is over. So we should actually utilize this time to make the public be more prudently aware that please do not shy away from talking about your mental health related problems, because it is preventable, it is treatable. Go for counseling if you are in a stressful situation. Maybe you can stop yourself from being mentally ill. If you can handle your stress, with more adequate coping strategies. Talk about it, talk within your social circuit, talk with your friends, talk among the peer groups is more important.
Right.
We as individuals can be aware of what is happening with the people around us.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the people next to you how you are doing. Ask your family members how you are doing. So this is the first step you can take as
Right.
a responsible individual.
Right. Okay, I just want to ask one brief question vis-a-vis Dr. Banerjee's article. And this has been mentioned earlier in this discussion as well. Socioeconomic indicators are a major variable when you're discussing mental health issues, and it is a bigger issue given the fact in India, given the fact that a large section of our population is in the economically weaker sections. Now, the proposed interventions in Dr. Banerjee in your paper, which you shared earlier, most of them, I mean, they seem a bit distant for the economically underprivileged, the people in the villages. How do you suggest the rural areas, the economically underprivileged, how does the access to mental health care facilities, especially for children, how do the parents identify and deal with the mental health of the children in the villages?
Yeah, see, Tariq, the thing is, one thing is very evident as to what is mental health. I think that should be targeted and understood first. To most of us, and being a psychiatrist, I'm sad to say this, but it exists immensely even in the medical community. Mental health is not the absence of mental disorders. I do not have a diagnosed depression, anxiety. I don't take pills for schizophrenia. I have a regular sleep. Doesn't necessarily mean that I am mentally healthy. I might still be waking up at 3 a.m. and thinking as to what is going to happen because I've lost my job. I'm still spending sleepless nights trying to struggle with my kid who is probably having behavioral issues. I'm having a lot of marital discord with my wife because I have not had this, time before where we were spending so much time together. So, firstly, what should reach the community is what do we mean by mental health? Very unfortunately, in our country, till doesn't matter what I am talking, doesn't matter what we all of us are talking here. Till a celebrity stands up and talks about that I am depressed, people will not recognize depression.
Right.
Till a social media movement starts mentioning with hashtag anxiety, you don't understand what anxiety is. It's ironical, but that's the problem. So this pandemic, what was it? It was a stress. It was an immense amount of stress. And what our awareness of mental health should be should transcend this pandemic. In fact, I had actually written exactly on what you discussed with Dr. Bhattacharya in Nature India. I'd be happy to share that article with you, with all of you, in fact, as to how this awareness that we developed probably about mental health, about psychological, social well-being during the pandemic, it can transcend even in the post-pandemic times. Coming to what can be done for the rural areas, see, firstly, there are different tiers of health systems. The primary healthcare level, the people who are, lay counselors, the ASHA workers, the multi-purpose health workers, the Anganwadi workers, the general physicians who deal with the district level, at the village level, at the panchayat levels. We are actively trying to train them. Now, telemedicine has been a boon. It's literally been a boon because different places have actually been linked. Connectivity has actually improved, and we are trying to have different hub spoke model where one person who is a specialist can actually take a session like you are doing here, training different people. Let's say somebody in Uttarakhand, somebody in Ahmedabad, somebody in Bengal, Assam, all of whom can then train the other people. So it's a TOT, it's the train the trainers approach.
Right.
Second is when they are detecting problems such as anemia, low birth weight, contraception problems, basic problems like malaria, tuberculosis, why not screen for mental health issues, common problems like depression, sleep issues, anxiety, suicide as well. So this train the train program, when it transits to suicide prevention, is called the gatekeepers training.
Right.
So what we claim is, irrespective of the socioeconomic status, every single person no matter what education qualification you have, where you work, what's your professional status, you can be a gatekeeper to save a person's life. And it always doesn't depend on technology. So we have our community camps. When we go to the community, to the rural areas which do not have a qualified psychiatrist, and we talk about, screening for problems, treating the problems. There is under the National Mental Health Program, they have the District Mental Health Program, DMHP, which is actively running in many districts. Just that, in the time of the pandemic, we have to rely a lot on teleservices and the public awareness. Tariq, this is something which I really, really want to say. It will never happen if we sit in our ivory boxes, ivory towers, and talk about it. No matter how much, I have been trying, like many other of my colleagues, I have been trying to write in several dailies, but then it goes to that extent as to how many people really will be reading the newspapers. Many of us will be reading those reports, folding it and keeping it in a stack. And a lot of us do not even read newspapers. So simply, what we do in our chambers transits nothing to the community. We have to take an active role, educate the local village leaders, the panchayat leaders, people who work in the village, the community health workers, the district health workers, people who travel to the district health workers from the district health offices, from the local hospitals, and most importantly, policymakers. And only then this intersectoral coordination can happen. Prescribing medicines is the easiest part of it, and that can be done, at the end. But the aim should be to prevent. And in community medicine, there are three concepts: knowledge, attitude, practice, which is called the CAP. And the same survey that I was mentioning, National Mental Health Survey, it showed a treatment gap of 80%, which means that for every 100 people who suffer from a psychiatric problem or a mental health disorder, 80 of them do not receive adequate treatment.
Right.
So only 20 people receive adequate treatment. So this gap needs to be reduced, and that needs a proper and effective communication at all levels of health.
Right. Well, this has been an insightful discussion. Before we go, I want to just go around for one final thought from each one of you. Rashi, first, based on your volunteering experience and your experiences prior to that, how wide do you think the gap is in India's mental wellness space? What more should be done, at least for the length of this pandemic?
Yeah, the gap is very large. As Dr. Banerjee also suggested, it is immense. Like he said, we are sitting here, we're having this discussion, but how many people is this going to reach is really there's a huge gap. So firstly, there needs to be awareness itself, and then there's the thing of actually telling them about how to get over it, right? So prevention, like he said, is most important, and it's very, very, very necessary. And especially it is, since we've already had that movement where mental health is gaining momentum, we should use this as a opportunity to kind of just use that as full throttle and go ahead and really drive that point down. That use this point and say that this is not just a pandemic, but in fact this can be this. We can use mental health awareness for the rest of our lives and really give everyone a much, much, much better life.
Right. Vrinda, first, and then Mr. Ramkumar. Do you think at any point during the last 1 year, did you ever feel like there should have been something more done by the authorities to recognize and address your issues? As Vrinda, you as a student, and Mr. Ramkumar, you as a parent and as a techie working from home with managing a family, working from home and working at home. Vrinda first, yeah.
Okay, so I think it was managed pretty well because every frontline worker put their best and at the front because I mean, at first, as someone mentioned, there was a lot of panic, and to curb that panic and to make people understand that it's a disease and it's a pandemic, that was something that was very well handled. But then again, online classes were a bit of a jolt to us because there was, as again somebody mentioned, a lot of a problem with attention because there were people not attending classes, there were people sleeping through classes. So that was a big problem. And as for exams, I'm having exams going to school, that's an on demand, but then there are people who are not giving any exams in school, only giving it through online mode, and then they are panicking of what they're going to do in the boards, because that's a big question mark right there. So I think as for now, it was pretty well handled, but then again, it is our responsibility to be able to go to school, give a test, and then be confident in ourselves to like do better in our lives as such.
Mr. Ramkumar?
To me, it's always a two-edged sword that you're talking about here, right? So first and foremost, important point that I would always say is, even before we get on to mental health, I think in India, the taboo around even COVID in itself, that in itself has to kind of, be changed. People's perception has to change, because these past 2 weeks, we've had various instances of the stigma. So that in itself, first of all, contributes to a considerable or sizable chunk of the already loaded mind, right? Secondly, as a society, and as I was hearing Vrinda talking, I just couldn't help but think about it. We are encouraged, or we are always in the mindset of exams, evaluations, and so on and so forth, right? And there are tech companies, there are there are hospitals, there are doctors, all of us who ask us to take life very slowly and so on. But as as Dr. Debanjan pointed out earlier, none of this translates into actionable items that we would normally say in the IT lingo, right? We need to learn to slow down as a society. That to me is the foremost pillar of acceptance of mental health, right? Because to me, I see two extremes. Either people just don't talk about mental health, or we've had some very strange cases of children, flaunting therapy sessions, saying, hey, you know what, I'm going for therapy. Because that's, to me, that's the spectrum of, people, the existential crisis right now. So to me, as a society, I think we first of all need to learn how to slow down, how things have to adapt and change to more of such epidemics that might, come in. Because this is, today it's COVID, tomorrow it could be something else. But I think the competitive nature of the society in itself, I think that still is the yardstick by which everyone is measured. And as much as we talk about all our therapies and support systems and so on, unless and until we have that space to think through and ruminate through all of these things, visible change is going to be a very tough thing. That, in my opinion, is what I would say the past 1 year has been.
Yeah, very briefly, how has this pandemic changed parenting for you?
I think I've become a lot more serious and responsible parent, because I think when you send your child to the school, you just tend to forget a lot of things and say it's the school's headache. But I think this has been a good reality check, because it has gotten us closer to the children in terms of how do they perceive things and where is it that we need to step in. So I believe it has strengthened my bonding with my children, and I hope there are other parents who, who've also felt the same, rather than because I know with an adolescent it's a different story, right? Adolescent, as much as we want to approach the child, they tend to move away because they need that space. On the contrary, in this age, children need us, and in that way, I think it's made me a better parent for sure.
Okay, closing remarks from Dr. Banerjee and Dr. Bhattacharya. India is not out of the woods yet vis-a-vis the pandemic. We are approaching a very dangerous second wave, and the restrictions might come back, and that might trigger another wave of mental health issues, let's say. So children are likely to continue to be restricted. What would you tell the panelists over here, as well as all the viewers and the parents out there, very briefly, how to help your children now cope with their issues? Dr. Banerjee first.
Dr. Bhattacharya, would you want to go first?
So it's always the same. Monitor your child very closely. Spend healthy times, quality times with your child. The red flags had already been discussed. you are now rather experienced with what to expect from a lockdown. All the parents, they have already experienced a lockdown within a confined space with their children. So you have the last year's experience to use, but use it wisely. Do not run the same mistakes. The children are already suffering from a lot of isolation, loneliness, lack of companionship, a halt in their regular growth. So be a bit more uh, empathetic towards the child's need instead of just monitoring them or just being a parent. Try to understand the child's perspective, what the child is trying to communicate, while the child is not being able to talk about it. Most of the times, we Indians, we think authoritarian parentings are the best way to handle your child, but no, give the child to speak about what they want to voice. Ask them how they're feeling. It might be a child of 2 years, it might be a child of 18 years. Give them the space to voice their concerns, what they want, how they want to spend their day. Do they want to, most of the times, because we are working from home, we feel happy if the child is sitting with a YouTube video for 2 hours so that we can work in peace. Do not do that to your child. While you need your space to work mindfully and in isolation, your child need you. So be conscious of that. Be aware of your child's needs. It, no matter what we say, it is only the parents who understand the child's best interest. So as a parent, before therapists, counselors, or anyone in this world, you are the one who can actually help your child. So be kind of the parent that you always wanted your parents to be, instead of blaming it on others. So yes, the lockdown might come up again, but use what you learned from the earlier lockdown.
Dr. Banerjee, very briefly, because we're running short of time.
Yeah. Just one thing, I've actually posted the article that I was speaking about in the chat. And Mr. Ram, I'm really thankful to you for that statement. I think we all need to take life a little slow and refrain from the rat race. And I'm sure going to use this for my future talks, because this is something I really, really liked. Let's hope first that we do not have to go into another lockdown. It's a dreadful experience to many. A lot of lives can come to standstill, can cause a lot of unemployment. But having said that, when we are approaching the second wave, for all the best that we can do, three aspects of it. One, emotional relationships. Let's use this time to build some, nurture relationships, mend some bonds, try and understand our children better, and improve our parenting skills. There is nothing like good, bad parent, but this also gives a scope for us to enjoy with our children. We can play games with them, spend time with them, and this is the time that we have. Second, physical activity and structuring. So like us, children also need a schedule, a regularized schedule, a physical activity at some point of the day, some kind of group activities involving all the members, and some sort of structure, especially when there is no school and home demarcation right now, will be very important. Third, education. And online education is a different ball game. That's a separate thing to talk about. But everything cannot be evaluated in terms of examination marks and statistics. So it's okay if things are a little slow. It's okay if a one class is not attended properly. Ultimately, education is a process. It's not 1 hour or 1 year of your life. So I request everyone to help the children understand, take this opportunity and understand what education is, or what the subjects particularly mean for you. Having said that, Vrinda, I really wish you all the best for your exams, the upcoming exams.
Thank you so much.
And I think one last message will be, the pandemic will eventually leave, sometime or the other. I hope it will just get tired of us and leave. But there are a lot of things it will teach us, which are for us to hold on to. And we were discussing if our message is going to reach to the public, whatever we are discussing here. Well, Tariq, that's your responsibility. I leave it to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Banerjee. That is something that we all indeed hope the discussions that we've had today reach as many people as possible. Thank you, all of us, for all of you for joining, Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Bhattacharya, Vrinda, Rashi, and Mr. Ramkumar. Thank you for taking out the time and having this really interesting and insightful discussion and bringing different perspectives of mental health onto the stage. Thank you, all of you, for watching. Until next time, stay safe and bye bye.